Attention proto throttle users. If you've ever wanted to have your throttle fit more comfortably in your hand and change the batteries without removing the throttle's case, now you can. Introducing the Narrow Throttle, a new product developed by Scott Thornton that reduces the size of the proto throttle by over 25%. Log on to narrowthrottle.square.site to learn more. That's narrowthrottle.square.site. Enjoy more comfort and never have to open the case again. From trackside to roadside and wherever you'd see a sign, Scale Signs has it all. With over 1,400 offerings in N, HO, S, and O scale, Scale Signs has the largest collection of fine scale signs on the planet. Come see the details that bring your models to life on their website, scalesigns.com. What if I told you that you could have the most realistic track work on the planet without hand laying or expensive jigs? Introducing the Roadmaster series from Oak Hill Model Railroad Track Supply. Straight track, curved track, diamonds and turnouts that are easy to assemble and provide all the detail of real track. And coming soon, curvable turnouts. Learn more on their website, ohrtracksupply.com. ATLP Extra is our monthly newsletter delivered right to your inbox each month. Sign up for free at atlpextra.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. On this episode, we're going to be talking about bringing old layouts to new. We're calling it This Old Layout, although we won't be playing the This Old House theme because we could never afford the licensing for it. But you can just play it in your head and imagine it, and it'll be an earworm that'll stick with you for a week and a half. Joining us from Rochester, New York, Ed O'Connell.
Hi, Ray.
And Rob Bartels.
Hey, Ray. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Glad to have both of you gentlemen here. Ed, I got to make a visit out to Rochester, got to see the Rochester Model Railroad Club in person. You were kind enough to invite me, and you walked me around the layout, and you showed me all the things that were happening. And immediately we thought, boy, we have a topic for a podcast here, as you guys are doing a ton of work. And I believe I got to meet you as well while I was doing that tour, Rob.
Yep. I was over by the computer.
That's right. You were doing you're doing some computer hacking or something over there, and getting you guys up to the 21st century at the Rochester Model Railroad Club. And no, it's been quite a journey, and I can't wait to dive into that and talk about all the things that you've been doing. But first, why don't you guys give us a little bit of background? I'm going to start with you, Ed. Tell us a little bit about your involvement with the Rochester Model Railroad Club.
Well, I moved up from northern New Jersey at the end of 2010, and I'd done a little research before I came up here and found that the Rochester Model Railroad Club was just a few miles from my house. So I test drove it around the block for a couple of weeks before actually joining, and I brought a lot of the the nuances and things that from my 3 years as a member of my previous club down in New Jersey, bringing up some of the ideas of what stuff they did down there, and just bringing it forward. The club dates back to 1939. It's one of the oldest clubs in the country, and we've had several homes. However, we've been fortunate to be in our current home for over 35 years. The previous homes that we were in for like 10 years each. But prior to that, the club moved many, many times. Nickname of the club in the early years was the Build, Tear Down, and Start Over instead of the Seneca Valley lines. But we've been fortunate that we've been in our current location for over 35 years. The layout looks absolutely gorgeous. People love to come and see it, but it's still a 35-plus-year-old layout that needs to be upgraded, not necessarily on the top side, but definitely on the bottom. And sometimes it feels like I'm a vascular surgeon having to do surgery on the human body without cutting the skin open.
And how about you, Rob? Tell us about your time with the Rochester Model Railroad Club. How'd you get started with them?
So I'd just gotten back into the hobby over COVID during lockdown because My main occupation was working in music technology and things like that. And, over COVID, got into model railroading, right? And I'm an N scaler first, when I first started, but then I found this club, and I'm a big ops guy. I got into operations very quickly and did an operating session there with the NMRA ops around the clock that Ed runs, and found out they do every Monday night, and came down and they trapped me, and I live there now. So it's home. It's a really fun place to go. I always look forward to Monday nights and being able to run. So and being able to work on stuff, it's a very rewarding place to be. So yeah, it just kind of has this magnetism to it. If you live near it, you're going to be part of it.
You were mentioning the age of the club. How old is the layout itself? Are there sections that go back that far, or what would you say is like the oldest part of the layout?
Well, the club moved many, many times over the years. However, the current location that we've been in, they were forced to move their previous location because the Elks that owned the building sold it, and they moved their club to an adjacent town. So we had to get out of there, and they looked to find a suitable location. And the layout that we have was actually built to fit the space that we have, starting in 1989. It was built in two phases. The first phase was essentially the staging yard, the city of Buffalo, and the towns of Caledonia and Rochester Junction with a turnback loop just to get trains running for a couple open houses and stuff while they built the benchwork and started adding the second phase of the railroad, which is the towns of Victor, Geneva, the Lehigh Gorge, Bethlehem, Allentown, and Jersey City. So the layout is in fact, up close to 35 years, but it was specifically built to fit that space.
So tell us a bit more about what kind of technology, because I mean, if you, I barely remember 1989, and Rob, I don't know if you can remember at all 1989, but I'm sure Ed can remember it a little better.
Nope, wasn't
But
alive yet.
yeah, so you weren't even around. I was 9, and Ed, you were probably a young man. Tell us about the technology of the day in 1989, and kind of the stuff that they had to use to build the layout and make it so that it was a good operating layout for that era.
Well, it wasn't a good operating layout in the time because it was initially built for DC block control. When it was initially built, the quality of the rolling stock that they had way back when, for those that do go way back then, was not the greatest. And they decided that they wanted a layout that was representative of a local railroad, was a two-track main line, and with local significance. And the thing is, they wanted it completely flat with the belief that if you can make it out of the staging yard, you can make it all the way around the layout and not have an issue. Previous layouts at the time that they had in previous locations either had ridiculous grades or went from 4 tracks to 2 tracks to 1 track, and were not operable per se. Back in that time period, operations weren't necessarily a big thing. It was built as DC block control with twin coil switch machines, rudimentary detection, and the like. Fortunately, over the course of the years, a lot of the legacy wiring has since been removed from underneath the layout. It's amazing the piles of wire that I've taken out from under there over the years. The only original wiring that's left that I know of are still for the track blocks, and they're not necessarily run in the most efficient manner. But I've got 2 sections of the railroad already consolidated into the old, DC block control distribution boards. And I'm going to be consolidating this one other gigantic snake cable with 16 14 gauge conductors in it and shortening it up because it's just way too long for what it needs to be, just to make the layout a little bit more electrically concise. The electrons don't need to be flowing that distance. And if I can get, a third of the wiring out from under there and run things in a more efficient manner. The guys that built the railroad, a lot of them aren't around anymore, and the documentation is poor or non existent. or when, back in the day, a lot of the members of the club were engineers that worked for Kodak or Xerox or whatever, and any documentation that they may or may not have written was in some type of code that cannot necessarily be deciphered. So while I've been going out there doing what I call the taming of the spaghetti, doing my vasculature replacement, making things a lot neater and tighter, and documentation in plain English.
Let's go back and talk about why there's so much wire there, because for younger folks like Rob and I, you want to run a double track main line, you want to run a ton of trains, just put DCC in. But in 1989, that really wasn't a thing. Talk about the challenges and what really had to happen in 1989 to even make a railroad even start to function.
I didn't really get back into the hobby until, I'm going to say, 2007. I had been out of it for several years when life got in the way. But like I've said on the podcast in the past, that the hobby's always there for you. When you're ready to get back on, it's ready to welcome you with open arms.
Absolutely.
And that it did. And with joining the Garden State Model Railroad Club in North Halden, I got exposed to DCC and all of the wonders that it could do. After being out of the hobby for, 15 years maybe or so, it was amazing the things and upgrades that have happened in the absence. So the club down there was, taught me a lot of things. When I came up here, I learned a little bit more about it, from some of the more experienced members. And, they're getting a little bit older now. So, it's time to pick up the torch and carry it to the next phase. As much as I want to say that you can't take it with you, so I'm not leaving, is not necessarily a true statement. But while I won't be around for long, or I won't be around forever, let's put it that way, I want to be able to leave the layout to the future and tighten it up into current practice and standards so that it's much easier to understand than it was. The club didn't convert to DCC until, I'm going to say, about 2008. So they ran under DC block control up until then. And when they originally cut over, they essentially cut the DCC into the old DC blocks and left a lot of legacy wiring in there. So you could just imagine some of the gremlins that we were chasing for years to bring it up to the current standards and just taking it to the next stage.
Well, I understand DC block control being that it was supplying power within blocks. And when you entered blocks, you had to power them to the controller that you were using for the train you were using, and continuously change as the train moved, flip those switches so that the DC power was coming from your controller. Do I have a base idea of that? Because what I want to do is just get everybody kind of an understanding of, this older technology and why the heck there's just so much wire and what was really required. Because I think a lot of us on that DC side, we're so spoiled. You run a bus line, you run drops, it's all one line and it's all digital control. This was something that was wildly complicated.
Well, yeah, the railroad was initially built, back in 1989. They just wanted it for public display, continuous roundy stuff. It wasn't necessarily developed for ops. So they had essentially two cabs, and either the track was on or it was off. And you would just turn the blocks on that you needed, and this one throttle would run anything where the blocks were on. That's the way they did it at the time. It's before my time being up here by many, many years. So I don't really know exactly how they did it, because the railroad had been converted when I came up. But, from my understanding, I think that's how they did it.
And Rob, you pretty much understand that just whatever it was, there was just a ton of wire under there, because I know you've spent some time under that layout, haven't you?
Oh yeah, and I'm so glad I missed it. But I also like, the thing is too, is I'm a reader. I love, I've my buddy Jeff, he's always got a book for me. And one of the things he introduced me to is John Armstrong, who's from our neck of the woods. He's from Canandaigua, New York, which is just about 20 minutes south of here. I never got to meet the guy, obviously, but he would always talk about wiring, and like he was from the era of DC only, and he was a layout designer, right, for operations and so on and so forth. And oh my god, every time I read one of those track plans, I'm like, and they did it in block cutouts, like ew, like that sounds brutal. Like how many toggles do you need for that? And especially for the era too, toggles weren't cheap. They've gotten so much cheaper now, but oh my god, the amount of switches you would need to keep those things going. And some of the other layouts I've seen where yeah, where they're all DC, they started as DC. There was a guy out here who started a whole Erie coal layout, and it was all rotary switches. And oh my god, it looked like a nightmare. I was like, I wouldn't want to run on that. Just can we just watch the trains run? I don't want to do anything. Cause yeah, DC block cutout sounds insane. And on Rochester Club's layout, we do have like a district cutout panel, but it's not necessarily like a block cutout panel. It's a little bit different, but as I understand, if correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, that's later edition, but it is from the DC era, right?
Some of the local paddles do date back to the DC era,
Yeah.
but originally everything was supposed to be run from the pit. When they wanted to try to start doing some ops, that's when they figured out, you know what, we got to move the controls, at least for the turnouts, out into the aisle,
Right.
because doing it from the pit just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
So this thing called DCC comes along, and they have this DC layout that was really just designed for show more than it was for operations. Talk about what challenges were presented when they just simply tried to put the DCC through the system that was designed for DC.
Well, there was some pushback in the beginning. There were the those that didn't believe in this newfangled DCC stuff. They wanted to keep one direction of the main line in DC and the other line to go in DCC. But when you put crossovers in there, they had to spike them shut until they can convert the entire railroad. Because if you try and mix the two, very bad things happen. So for a while, there was a lot of pushback and say, okay, well, I got DC stuff, so you can run east. Well, I got DCC stuff, so you can run west. But heaven forbid you wanted to try and cross main lines. There would be either blue smoke galore or flames.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like
very,
any
very
fun.
very expensive mistakes.
The single use smoke unit, I call it.
Yeah, or we're releasing the blue magic or the magic blue smoke or whichever way you want to put it. Yeah.
That's it.
So they finally decide, okay, maybe they go full DCC, and you finally can sell that to the club. Then as you walk in the door, Ed, was it completely DCC when you came in?
Yes, but a lot of twin coils still remained.
Tell us about twin coils. What are these twin coils?
So as opposed to a stall motor like a tortoise or a cobalt, or the other types of where current is constantly supplied to the motor, keeps pressure on the stock rail in the proper direction. Twin coils was an electrical solenoid that you just changed the polarity, and it would be the old snap style switch. You would hear a noticeable snap when it went from one direction to the other. Whereas it's on a stall motor, you'll see the points move in a lot slower, more prototypical manner. In fact, a lot of the twin coils that they had on the railroad were never even connected because, like I said, the railroad was never built for operations. They figure, okay, well, let's build this really big yard, and we're going to put all these twin coils in there. They were never connected for probably in excess of 18 years. When they finally tore them all out, they tore milk crates of wire out from underneath the railroad that did absolutely nothing because it wasn't connected. And they took out all the twin coils and put tortoises in.
I'm just thinking about the challenge of that. You're talking about, wiring that was there for no purpose. And then you hinted at before, this is inherited work. This isn't something you put in or somebody put in. These are generations before that put in this wiring.
Yeah.
And now you're trying to completely decipher it. And from what it also sounds like, it's kind of like the challenge of the prototype. You don't want to take the layout completely down because you don't want to not be able to operate it. So you still want to leave it in some form of condition where you can run trains on it, but still make all these improvements. That's got to be a major challenge for you guys.
Well, that's true. We do have a somewhat of a set schedule of events, and we usually keep the last Monday of every month as an open run night. So you can come down and you can put stuff on on the rails and run whatever you want. When we do op sessions, we treat the railroads as it's the Lehigh Valley in the 1950s with some flexibility. Not all of our locomotives fit that time frame, but for the most part, we emulate the mid 50s on the Lehigh Valley. But for everybody else, has a vast range of what they like, either eras, prototype, or whatever. They're welcome to bring stuff down, put it on the rails, and run it, preferably if it meets all the club standards and recommended practices. Somebody can pop something down on the rails, and with everybody else trying to run it, it creates nothing but havoc. We try and keep the last Monday of the month open for that. Members can try to run on the other nights. However, there is no guarantee that that will happen. We try and run around it. If we have to blue flag a track, we got the little light up guys that we could put on the rail and say, okay, this route is now closed. But for the time being, the work's got to get done sometime. I make it a point to get down there really early on a Monday, and I get started working on the railroad anytime, noon, 1 o'clock, and then other people start filtering in around 5. So I get a good head start to get stuff done before people start showing up. The best that I can do is if I got to take a section down, that's my time to do it. And then I can hook it back up and then move on to something else.
This sounds like very much like the story of how do you eat an elephant? It's really one bite at a time. And it seems like it's one of those kinds of projects, a bite at a time. Rob, tell us a little bit about how you started to get involved with this major renovation project for the layout.
Yeah, and I always characterize it as a game of telephone too, because because we up until recently we haven't had set and explicit design rules, like the way we do our stall motors, how we wire them, color coding, things like that, right? One of the other things was we would have what I call bad turnout hygiene, where people leave turnouts set the wrong way. And, you would always end up shorting out and everyone stops and says, oh, East Main is down. What do we do? And I always be like, somebody hit the wrong turnout. One of the things I always wanted during the operating sessions was a CTC panel. And after going to Drew James and seeing all the other layouts online, because I can't get away from Rochester that easy, I really fell in love with the idea of CTC. And I've always experimented with JMRI. So I started looking at Don's layout too with does he use CATs or is it straight JMRI?
Don is using CATs.
He's using CATs. Yeah. So I play with CATs too. And I've made my own mimic panel of the layout for now, where it's the layout editor with every turnout on it. And one of the first things I did was set up a macro to set up the main line straight. Just set the main line normal as soon as I turn it on, and we're good. And then from there, we're getting into things like doing all the different types of routes, arrivals, departures from the yards, industries, any of the sidings on the layout, because there's a litany of sidings all over the place. And yeah, ways of getting around to bypassing. Say if we, during an operating session, have like a scenario where we have a train with dead power, right? Like a bad locomotive, quote unquote, and one main line is down and you have to send both lines of traffic through like the East Main. I have a way of basically setting it up so we can alternate trains east and west. And it also turns into the operating scheme, because right now we currently have a car for car scheme where it's swap a box car for another box car. I've always been if there was a rivet counter for operations, that would be me. I want it complex. When I found out about like the fact that you can change the daily schedule of an industry in JMRI, like, oh, this car only gets dropped on a Monday and this other car only gets picked up on a Thursday. And like you could get so granular with the loads and all the different ways things work basically though, yeah, like just getting all of these tools that are free and available now too, brought and applied to this incredible application. Because this layout, how many turnouts does it have, Ed?
Minimum of 200, probably closer to 250.
Yeah, easily
Wow.
250.
Wow.
And it's ridiculous. There's so much to do on it. And it's one of those layouts where it's like, oh my God, I can actually have realistic traffic flow. Like you actually can, and you can have trains with an actual purpose of like, okay, we have too much here. We got to do an extra to go there. Or like it really gets you to a point where you can make all of these really necessary jobs without just being like, oh, this is the local that used to run at this point in time. And we're doing it because that's what they did. It's like, no, we actually need this to make stuff resolve. We're in the early stages of that still. I'm still learning a lot. But basically, yeah, it's for this like hyper realism of how the Lehigh ran traffic. So yeah, and not to mention the passenger trains. Like they're legendary for some of their passenger trains. Ed has on his he always has on his backgrounds when we're on meetings, he always has the SVL logo I did with the Lehigh Valley PA behind him. And yeah, like the Black Diamond. I mean, that thing's legendary. And to see that run through the layout when everyone else is trying to do locals, get out of the way, the Black Diamond's coming through. Like that stuff's so fun.
We talked about the spaghetti that's under the layout, but let's talk about the track work that's on top of the layout. Was this track plan that was, original, what was inherited, conducive for operations, or were there some major changes that needed to happen there to make operations work?
It was predominantly built as a 2-track railroad, folded over on itself. It was somewhat adapted to ops around the time when I joined. They were doing some rudimentary operations, but if you think of the Lehigh Valley Railroad, was approximately 400 miles long that ran from Jersey City, New Jersey to Buffalo. Well, to try and fit that in 2,400 square feet, a lot of it's got to you give.
Right.
Because the layout wasn't necessarily built for operations, several key items that would be really nice to have don't exist. Mainly the main yard at Thayer and another large yard in Manchester, which is not too far from Rochester. There is one yard that's on the layout. Unfortunately, it's all the way at the west end of the railroad and it's oriented west. So while we can make it work, we got to make it work. We did add crossovers, some additional track to make stuff flow a little bit better. Our town of Caledonia was a massive bottleneck before we added these extra crossovers and turnouts to help traffic flow. We do the best we can with what we got. We are doing pretty well, but it would really be nice to be able to have some online yards to move cars between. But that's one of those things that we just got to live with what we got.
And well, the other thing is though too is it doesn't like, as someone who came into it literally within the last 5 years, you wouldn't be able to tell that it wasn't originally built for ops, because while the yard is facing west, you can get away with it. All the glass tracks are stub ended, but the arrival departures are bidirectional. As someone who's ran the yard recently too, you can really get away with running a lot of things east at the same time when you have to. But yeah, like the way the towns are set up and the way the things are spaced out, especially, it's something that doing all those panels really showed me, was how evenly distributed a lot of the industries were along the main. Like they're really the main, like the one spot of like scenery only without really an industry is our signature scene of the gorge, the big Lehigh Valley Gorge. And it's this beautiful like traversal space, but everywhere else you got work to do. Like, you go there now and you would never be able to tell it was originally set up as a point, like just roundy layout.
Now, somebody might be listening to this and say, wow, you've got all of this. You've got some yards that may face the wrong way, may present a challenge, may not be exactly what everybody wants for 2025. Why not just rip it out? But I imagine there's a lot of sentimental value to what this layout is given that it has such a long history. I mean, even back to when it was put in back in 1989. Talk about the political support, Ed, and how the members, react to the changes being made.
We do have an operational trolley line interurban that runs off the overhead catenary. Sections of that have been imported from the previous layout. When they were at the Elks Lodge, they actually cut these sections out and then built the new layout around them. So one end is Jersey City, and the other end is a little town that we call Ravens Run. And then they ran fresh trackage between the two. And it's still old school DC, but it runs off the overhead. So both rails are negative and the overhead is positive. And we have one member it meticulously maintains the catenary on that. A lot of sentimental value with there because two of the people that built it were Ed Van Leer, Master Model Railroader number 2, and Harold Russell, Master Model Railroader number 14.
Wow.
So being that we're getting close to Master Model Railroader number 800, these guys go way back.
Yeah.
There's a lot of we've got a harbor scene that we would like to adapt and make it usable more for ops. However, it was built and those people aren't around anymore. So yeah, there is a lot of sentimental value in there. So how can we make this work and still keep what we've got? And it may require some other little, manipulating around to make it work.
I think of it as legacy support of like if you were to think of it as if it were like a piece of software you deal with. It's like you have all this stuff that you've had all this time and you still want it to be good. And you still want it to be functional and you still want it to be useful. And that's really what we're doing is like, yeah, like we have all of this stuff, all this hardware, all this bench work, and it's great. It's like this bench work is like, it's solid. It's not going anywhere. And the track work, it's really, really, really well laid. Like easement curves, everything really professionally done. And it really is just about keeping this, like the wiring really was the only thing that went obsolete because of DCC. But other than that, I mean, track work. And as far as how they laid it and how they set things up, things are really solid. So when you get into, like the working trolley line, I mean, oh my God, that's a work of art. And of course you want to keep that running. There's really nothing we run into that becomes obsolete anymore. The only other thing would be like the question that comes up sometimes is the idea of forward dating it one day, but that kind of scares everyone. The idea of that, of like, what do you want to do? What are you nuts? Like, what? Okay, Mr. Moneybags, how are we going to do this? But like, honestly, I like it as this museum piece of the Lehigh and letting people know this was in their backyard. Like you go around Rochester now and it's like you're looking at ghosts. You don't realize that, like Dinosaur Barbecue, our favorite barbecue restaurant in Rochester, that's the Lehigh Valley station.
Oh.
Like it still says LV on the cupola of the building. And it's
just a block and a half away from the club too.
And that's one of the things that I got into during lockdown when I first found the hobby was I would go on drives because we're basically the Finger Lakes region, and it's driving country. This is where you go out for long aimless drives and find stuff. And I ran into Manchester one day and found the old roundhouse and Rochester Junction. You see the old the station burned down a while ago, but the concrete foundation is still there, and you can see, wow, this used to be a hub. This used to be a very big deal. And now it's the middle of nowhere. Like there's all this stuff hidden and you feel like an archaeologist sometimes, but then you see it alive and well. And it makes you think, what happened to the railroads? Like what it makes you ask so many questions, which is so necessary this day and age. Because I in my opinion, railroads are still incredibly relevant, and we honestly need we need a lot more support for the railroads. So seeing this era where railroads really were king is important. So keeping this stuff up and running is paramount.
And what you're saying about the Rochester layout is something I've said before, but it's really the power of model railroading when it comes to history. We can visualize history in the model form. When folks come in, you can tell them this was the way it was. I mean, you can show them old photographs in that 2D kind of way, but when you see that three-dimensional feel and say, I know where this is, and I remember this part of the neighborhood, or this is the way it was. And it definitely is such a underappreciated, and I think a lot of times underutilized history telling tool.
Man, it's the best feeling in the world to be like actually there. Yeah, to go from the layout to the real world and back and be like, oh, I stood there. That's right around the corner from me. Or yeah, I've driven past that 1,000 times. I had no idea what it was. In our region too, we have sadly it's not represented that much anymore. The New York Museum of Transportation out in Rush has some of their old equipment, but used to have a trolley line that would reach from Rochester all the way down to Geneva, which is I don't know, 80 miles, something like that. It's far. And it was
Not quite that far, but
something like that. A lot. It's still far, but they would it's a electric trolley line that used to be there, and you go around and you see these random mileposts and you're like, that's not where the Lehigh Valley was, that's not where New York Central was, that's not where the West Shore was. What is it? Then you look it up online, it's like, oh, that's that's the Rochester rail cars. Oh my god. Like, and you find all these things that are part of your hometown. And that's kind of comes with this territory too, being on the old water level route. You just like you don't realize how many stories are just sitting there on the ground around you. And this like that's a big part of this club for me is like you see these beautiful like craftsman made structures like that Bob Hogarth built and a few of the other guys too. But Bob Hogarth is the one that comes to mind for me because he built Rochester Junction, if I'm correct.
Rochester Junction, he built
Mhm.
Geneva, he built Caledonia.
And they're beautiful buildings, and it's literally like they would always all the guys would tell me they would just sit in the back working with sticks,
Yeah,
just build them out of sticks. And it brings you back into the hobby too at that point where you're like these guys looked at these CAD drawings, and like Harold Russell's drawings too is from Rochester.
sure.
He's the most published, one of the most published people in model railroader history, and he has so many countless structure drawings, and these guys built it to the T of what these buildings were, and you get to actually experience what these things were at the time when they were around, which for someone like me, a millennial who missed out on all that, that means a lot.
A lot of the places we'll have around the railroad will have a picture of what was there and then our model representation of the same thing.
Right.
And in some cases, it's hard to tell the difference between the two. Maybe a little bit of selective compression in there, but hey, this is what used to be what's there. If you go there now, this is what used to be there, and this is what we did to model it. And it's very difficult to tell the difference.
Yeah.
I'm so happy I started the show by calling this episode This Old Layout. I grew up in the 80s, and I remember Bob Vila and This Old House. And boy, I think the parallels here, they would take a house that was historic, that had value, that had sentimental value, that had all the historic value, and they would save it. For you guys, it's really the same thing. Here's a layout that has so much sentimental value, has history within itself, with many amazing model railroaders having their touch on it. So yeah, it's not a layout that you want to do the good old sawzall, take the whole thing out, redo it, because there's just too much there. So, in comes Ed and Rob and the team there at the Rochester Model Railroad Club to bring this all back to life. You talked about pulling spaghetti out of there in baskets upon baskets of old wire. Tell us what the plan is to slowly turn this over into a layout that is not only this beautiful scenery and all this history, but now can provide some really awesome and reliable operations to add to that storytelling aspect.
Well, we've recently, with Rob's help, he's more of the tech guru than me. I'm fine playing the mole and crawling underneath and doing all the wiring stuff, but I'll turn all of the technology stuff over to him. We want to upgrade detection. At some point, we want to get into signals. It's been talked about for years and years and years. But it's like, oh man, that's going to cost a lot of money. But we got to do this first, and then we got to do that, and we got to. It's like, hey, well, you got to make the first step somewhere, or you're never going to get there. So we're doing that. We've got Wi-Fi enabled in there, so people are now. We put some Wi-Fi tracks modules in some of our Pro cabs because we were running out of wireless addresses on the NCE cabs. The people plugging in the tethered cabs were just beating the heck out of our plugins. So we're in the process of refurbishing those. But we like to run wirelessly, but we only had everybody likes to run a Pro cab as opposed to a cab 06 or an 04 because they can do a bunch more things with it. But because of the limitations of the system, we decided we were going to go with some Wi-Fi tracks modules. We've done that, which is great. Rob's been able to map the layout on virtual CTC just about. So we can take the dispatcher out of the pit and put him at a desk in the back room.
Yeah.
And he can control all of the turnouts and the routes there, as opposed to having the crew need to do it out on the road. He can clear them a route. Once we're able to put the new detectors in, like Rob mentioned Jeff before, we're determining, well, this is where the blocks were. Is it where the blocks are supposed to be? So we may be adding new ones, or we may be shortening them up, or making them longer, or trying to make them so we can put detector in them, and then we can effectively signal it.
On top of that too, this layout really needs to be wireless to be enjoyed, because you're really walking a lot. It's the way it works with the what is it, 2-3-ish peninsula design. It's like you're walking in and out of peninsula pits, and that was the first thing we were thinking of when we were thinking of the computer, was getting a my friend Todd works at a company in town that works on computers, and they actually host the virtual rail fan camera in Fairport, New York, and he comes across old computers all the time, so he donated a couple of these little HP Cube desktops with a little i3 in them, and it's more than enough to run GMRI. We ran the NCE Cat 5 panels, so you could run a really long cab bus connection to the main layout from the other room, because one of the big things that I disliked about dispatching when we ran operating sessions was you were not running blind. You could cheat. You could kind of screen watch. And when you're doing an operating session and you're dispatching, if anything, that's kind of a distraction, because then you're staring at Caledonia the whole time, and you're chatting with the guy running Buffalo Yard, and then suddenly you forget that Bethlehem even exists. and you have all these, when you're in the back and you're looking at a panel, yeah, you're going to be back there by yourself, but that's kind of the best part, is you got this mini game all to yourself, and you have to really intuit what's happening. And to go on to this old house metaphor too, is with the talking signaling and upgrades and things like that. It reminds me of this old house because I grew up on it. My parents spent their whole adult lives just outside of Boston, and they actually met Bob Vila once, and because they had a very, very old house in Maynard, but they looked at it one time. But one of the main things I learned from all of that was, it's not about the sunk cost fallacy. It's about saving the things that are worth saving. And it's interesting because when we have arguments at the club, everyone usually has a valid point, which is the most maddening part, because we're talking about doing signaling, right? And immediately get pushback. And I'm like, okay, I understand. They didn't do signals here. I know, but you got to remember, this is a model too. This isn't the real thing. And this also isn't exactly the same track plan. We need signals for some things. And no, they did not have block detection back then. And when we do operating sessions, we carry around walkie-talkies. They didn't have those then either. But we adapted, right? Because we wanted to preserve the integrity of the operator. Because we can experiment. We have where we've done actually we haven't tried this yet, doing instead of carrying walkie-talkies, have the walkie-talkies at the towers to represent phones rather than carrying them around. And as far as signals, work our way up. So it doesn't end up just looking like a CSX main. Like we're like, okay, we have a blind spot at the end of Jersey City where it loops back into staging, and people rear end each other over there. So it helps to have something that gives you an idea of where your blind spots are and what's on the other side, right? And kind of working from there up rather than being like, oh no, we're doing snow hoods, baby. We're going straight to it. No, doing some searchlights and getting some basic logic going so we can have a little bit smoother track flow. And dispatcher will have a little bit more to work with than just like virtual tabs on a screen. But at the same time, preserving the integrity of how it ran at the time without being like, oh no, we got all this movie magic that it just, it doesn't resemble the Lehigh Valley anymore. But by doing this kind of helps us preserve those important things, right? Like if you have an old piece of furniture in your house, like some piece of Shaker furniture, maybe you use some polyurethane on it to keep it from dry rotting or whatever you do to preserve old woodwork. You may use a modern technique that didn't exist at the time of the making of that piece, but because you have it now, what's stopping you from using it? Right? Are you trying to like the ship of Theseus? If you replace every board, is it still the ship? But we're not replacing every board. We're just trying to keep it alive. We're trying to keep it in one piece.
And Ed, it seems like a balancing act, right? So you're trying to preserve the layout. You're also trying to attract younger folks and keep the generations going within the club and do it in a way that keeps the current membership happy as well. So talk about that balancing act.
Yeah, we have gotten quite a few newer members over the years, and we want to try and get them a lot more involved in the hobby because eventually, we're going to have to turn this over to somebody, and we want them to learn. Okay, this is how it works now, and this is why it works the way it does. Because if it breaks down the line, and I'm not here to fix it, hopefully you can. Trying to figure it out. Years down the road, it's like, what the heck was this guy thinking? It just doesn't cut it.
Yeah, the things
Fortunately,
Ed's gone through.
yeah, yeah. Fortunately, a lot of the legacy wiring has come out, but I still scratch my head under there. Kind of like, oh, wait a second, I'm tracing a red wire, and why did it just change to yellow?
Yep.
And
And there
now
were days.
now it goes down. Now it's back to red, but it's a much smaller gauge. Why is this, and why is it not labeled?
Well, there were days where I would come down there and you would show me like, yeah, I got 60 feet of wire. Neither end was connected to anything. That happened at least 3 or 4 times where you're
Yeah.
just like, what's this for?
Well, it certainly seems like you guys are putting in a lot of that great work that's going to make the Rochester Model Railroad Club be one that can be passed down through the generations and not have all the struggles and challenges that you guys are putting in now. You're putting in that hard work so that it can be better for everyone in a club that's going to last a much longer. They're gonna be celebrating years and years and years. So that I'm sure everybody is thankful for you guys to keep that legacy going and put in that hard work.
In fact, the Rochester Model Railroad Club was somewhat of a test bed for the op squad. Before I started inviting other people to into the squad itself, a lot of the ideas that they came about was the test bed for the op squad. It's like, what do we need to do to make this better?
Yep. Big
Yeah.
time.
So taking lessons there and taking them out to the community as well. So a lot of great stuff. Appreciate you guys coming by and telling the story of the Rochester Model Railroad Club. As part of this episode, we asked the question of the month: what major improvements have you made on your layout? And we've got 5 great answers submitted to us. Again, if you want to be heard on Around the Layout, you can go to aroundthelayout.com/question and submit your answer for the question of the month. So let's start by heading out to Long Island.
Hey, Ray. Dave Braza from Long Island, New York. I did 3 things in the last year or so that I really, really felt like improved the layout. First one was backdrops on the top level, so you can't see people across on the other side of the room. Second thing was skirting between the lower level and the floor so that you can't see all of the junk that's under there. And then the third thing was to get a bunch of cushy rubber mats from Harbor Freight and cover the floor, the majority of the floor with them. Everybody responded really positively to that stuff. Had nothing to do with trains or tracks or operations, but creature comforts are important. See you soon.
Yeah, how important is that when you can be able to stand and walk around the layout without having your feet screaming at you about an hour in?
Smart man.
Oh yeah, I've had the opportunity to operate on Dave's layout. The thing is incredible, and I look forward to going back and doing it again because those creature comforts were not there the last time I was there. But I had an absolute blast. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the layout itself to make an improvement, but view blocks and getting rid of the clutter puts you in the moment. Okay, I'm really running the New York and Atlantic Railroad in full scale. Yeah,
Right.
it's only 187th, but it puts you in the role.
The backdrop thing and the view block thing really just brought up an idea I heard of the other day from Southern Alberta Rail, who's one of my favorites. He calls them scenic traps. And he swears by, you want to have something that'll keep you from staring down the guy on the other side. And it also maintains your visual flow of your layout, which is a very important part of the artistic style of how your trains live. So doing backdrops, doing skirting, like that is just as much modeling as building a structure. Like it's all about how you compose it.
Yeah, I think that's called presentation points for sure.
Yeah, big time.
All right, going off of Long Island and heading up to Wappingers Falls, let's listen to Mr. Dennis Colucci.
Hey, Ray. My name's Dennis Colucci. I'm from Wappingers Falls, New York. And the biggest improvement that I've made to my layout is redoing a bunch of the track work. And when I built my layout, which is probably coming up on almost 10 years ago now, it was really a learning layout for me. I'd never done any bench work. I'd never laid flex track. I'd never done major scenery or anything. I'd never done anything beyond using SnapTrack to build little table layouts. So it was really a learning experience. And with learning comes mistakes. My biggest mistake on this layout was not making sure the track work was really good before I started trying to scenic it and really building an op scheme for it and things like that. And then once I did realize that the track work was not working well, I didn't immediately go back to the drawing board and relay it all. Now, with a lot of the layout, I was able to get things to work between adding feeders and shimming track and making sure things were a little more level. But there was one portion of the layout that I just wouldn't work. So I decided to tear it up and relay it. And as I did that, I decided I wanted to make it a little more prototypical. So I spread the tracks out. I went from 4 tracks down to 3, make sure the industries that they served had a little more space to breathe. And now it works a lot better. So I think that's the most major improvement I've made to my layout. Thanks for the show, Ray. Hope you're doing well, and can't wait to hear this episode.
No, thank you, Dennis. Appreciate that. And Ed, I really like that term, learning layout. It doesn't have to be your forever layout the first time around.
Absolutely not. And Dennis is that perfect person that is the one that we want to turn this hobby over to. I know Dennis. I had the opportunity to operate with him down at Island Ops. I did see him at Up Till You Drop in Syracuse for the past couple of years. We've developed a little online, presence with each other. Even though that the age gap, between the two of us, he's a pretty close friend, and he's that guy that we want to put that over to. And yeah, your first layout is not your last. You're always learning something, and even at my age, I'm still learning stuff.
Well, I think you're still young at heart, Ed. I think that's what helps all
Oh,
of
yeah.
that, too.
Oh, yeah.
I may have to grow older, but I refuse to grow up.
There you go. Good for you. Well, now we head out of New York and we head around the globe to Sydney, Australia.
My name is Justin Mitchell from Sydney, Australia. The best improvement I've made to my layout is upgrading all the actuating wires for my Smale switch machines. I use 1mm brass rod. Fantastic improvement.
Yeah, there you go. Some switch machines. You were talking about them earlier and upgrading switch machines. And Rob, it looks like he's got himself on his way to a little bit better reliability on his layout.
Oh, big time. And yeah, that's actually like switch machine serviceability is a big deal. And I mean, we've dealt with it plenty where we're starting to use brackets for are tortoises, and that's just a dumb smale. It's the same thing, but he's got ones with decoders in them. But man, like, yeah, just being able to have a serviceable actuating wire is a really big deal.
All
Yeah,
right,
we had
let's
to
hop.
convert a lot of ours to bell cranks, and
Yeah.
some really wicked engineering because they had to adapt the existing track work, without cutting the layout to bits to install it. So there was some creative engineering, but yeah, using a nice stiff wire, for the thicker bench work is definitely a must.
Well, let's hop over from Sydney to New Zealand.
Hi, Ray. Michael Neal from Auckland, New Zealand. One major improvement that I'm currently making to my model railroad is simplifying the track plan. When I first built my HO scale shelf layout 18 months ago, roughly one half of the layout was only used about 20% of the operation. And I saw an opportunity to expand this area into what is effectively the Minnesota Commercial's Midway Yard, which added a lot more extra variety and allowed me to double the operators from 2 to 4 in a session. When I began the trial operations, it felt a little bit cluttered and hadn't quite worked as I had initially envisioned it would. And so after a couple of weeks of trial and error, I decided that no, I would return to how I had the layout somewhat, but make some changes to improve the variety as well. So I'm currently in the middle of ripping up all the track that is being freshly laid, including all the wiring, and effectively will replace a 6-track yard with 2 small industries. It will still provide a lot of extra variety compared to what I had previously, still allow for extra operators, but visually will be a lot cleaner and allow a lot more room for scenery. So it comes back to that mentality that less is definitely always more. Thanks, Ray. Love the show. Cheers.
No, thank you, Michael. And yes, less is more. Isn't that right, Rob?
Oh my God, yeah. The pain is real though. Between him and Dennis tearing up track, I've been there, man. My first layout was in a bookcase in my apartment, and it had 4 double crossovers. And I thought more turnouts means more good, right? No, it does not. Like, being smart and practical. Ian Rice had a very, very good book called Small, Smart, and Practical. Changed my life. And it's just all about, like, you can end up with more operators with less turnouts. Who'd have thunk it?
And then our last submission, we're going back to the U.S. up to the Pacific Northwest and our good friend Dave.
This is Dave Honan from Snoqualmie, Washington. My layout doesn't exist yet, but with the help of the Slag King of Illinois, I made a major conceptual improvement earlier this year on the way to the Springfield show. After exploring a paper mill in upstate New York that I planned to model on a freelance layout, Matt Fricks and I drove the whole length of the former Delaware and Hudson Glens Falls branch and realized that it's an ideal prototype for the kind of layout I want in the space I have available. I immediately scrapped my make-believe track plan, and over the last few months have been refining this new concept, though I still intend to weave in the story of my freelance shortline. Researching the industries and traffic that were on the Glens Falls branch in my October 1994 modeling era has been enjoyable, and the information I've learned has strongly influenced track design and plans for operation. Also, linking back to the question of the month from episode 142, this conceptual improvement has helped me further refine purchasing decisions to specific cars and road names that were in use back then. Now, there's no telling when construction of my layout will actually begin, as I'm due to become a father around the time this response airs. But having a prototype-based concept to focus on and continue researching will help keep the flywheel turning while I'm changing diapers. Lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't give a plug for listeners to support the podcast on Patreon. Ray works with generous manufacturers and suppliers to put on a monthly giveaway for operating crew members, and recently I was the lucky winner of an Athearn Genesis SD80 Mac. For less per month than a large cup of Dunkin' coffee, you could be next.
Well, look at that. I'll that may be just clipped out and put out there as an ad for the operating crew. And thank you for Dave for that. And when you win yourself a $359 locomotive, I think you definitely get high on that. And it doesn't seem like that's changed his operating scheme though. But Ed, he's the kind of the takeaway I get out of it. The planning stages and really thinking it out before you start is really going to save you a lot of spaghetti underneath a layout, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Failing to plan is planning to fail, and Dave's got the right mindset. He knows where he wants to go, and at least point him in the right direction and keep him from making a lot of mistakes down the road.
And I feel that too. I don't have my own personal layout, but I'm in the same boat. I don't have a place for my layout yet, but I'm doing Fremo N Proto Lance Finger Lakes Railway. And I'm just taking my time and just letting it stay fictitious for now. And when the opportunity arises, it's going to be amazing when, because man, do I have time to plan. So doing things like that is a really smart move. And I mean, it keeps you engaged in the hobby in at least some way.
Absolutely. Yeah. So congratulations to Dave. One of the cool things about model railroading, as Ed said earlier, the hobby will wait for you.
Yeah.
And when the timing is right, then it will be right and done right. And a bit of planning will get you a long ways. So I want to thank everybody who submitted answers to the question of the month. Again, you can find that on our website, aroundthelayout.com/question. A lot of the stuff that we talked about today, you can also go to our website, aroundthelayout.com/163. Find some more notes, some links to the Rochester Model Railroad Club. We'll share some pictures as well, and some additional information and links about some of the products and books and things that we talked about tonight. So check that out again, aroundthelayout.com/163. Rob, Ed, thank you so much for coming on Around the Layout and telling us all about the improvements being made at this old layout, being the Rochester Model Railroad Club.
Well, there's kind of a belief that the Rochester Model Railroad Club is the best kept secret in the city of Rochester. We don't necessarily want it to be that way, but not a lot of people know about us. And those that do come to see us, it's like, wow, I never even knew this existed. So we try and get the word out as best we can. We do an open house for the general public every year. We try and promote it. We get a pretty good turnout to come, but the more the people that know about it, the better. So don't keep us the best kept secret in Rochester anymore.
Secret's out.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's episode, check out past shows, and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at aroundthelayout.com/crew. Follow us on social media, aroundthelayout.com/social. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.